Well, let's now talk to a well-known investigative journalist who actually met the spy involved in those early investigations, Martin Welz, of course, the publisher of the monthly magazine Noseweek. He joins us from our studio in Sea Point. Martin, thank you for being with us. What do you make of these claims? Because I think everything I'd read before named Thabo Mbeki, Trevor Manuel, and now we're hearing about Nelson Mandela's involvement.
I'm in two minds about that one. I'm not sure how certain Oatley was. I'm not sure to what extent it was maybe a surmise on his part, or whether he's speaking as if he'd spoken directly to Mandela. My impression was that he was throughout speaking to Thabo Mbeki and other cabinet ministers, not Mandela. But in any case, I think there are many reasons, looking back in history now, why the then cabinet was against pursuing those claims, and more likely one of the issues that was raised in the CX reports, which hasn't been recently reported, is that CX was already aware in 1997 that there was a lot of collusion going on between various European arms supply companies, and he named specifically Germany, France, Britain and Spain as plotting to sort of clinch hot deals with South Africa. And he suggested to Thabo that they could assist him, that is, CX could assist him in checking that out and monitoring what exactly was going on. Now, we know now that the one thing that the ANC at that time didn't want was to have a closer look at what their dealings were with the arms companies, because they profited so substantially from various kickbacks through various routes from those deals. That remains controversial today. In any case, so much for that. But on the question of why it's alive now, I think that is pretty obvious, because 20 years have passed. Nothing has been done in the meantime. All the significant information has in fact been known. Our magazine published the first material on the lifeboats already in 1993. That's 23 years ago. We've written about the CX reports, and there are dramatic elements to that report already several years ago. And still, there was no response then, no response. Everybody seemed to assume this was just old history. And I do believe that by now, although they should have been followed up, and there were substantial sums that could have been recovered, quite apart from having a closer look at how these things happened, by now, 20 years later, a lot of the documents will no longer be in existence. Many of the witnesses will not be around. I do suggest that far more interesting is in fact why the government of the time and the government up till today has done nothing about it. I think that's the real issue.
Well, Martin, you have put forward a
ABSA lifeboat.
You've put forward a claim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've basically suggested that the money wasn't recovered. The ANC took a stance not to recover the funds, but to learn, unfortunately, from what the apartheid government did, basically a lesson in looting. Do you stand by that?
I absolutely stand by that. I can tell you that at the time, and this is 1996, 97, because before CX got involved with the government, I was aware of several of those issues arising from the toll gate inquiries. But in any case, I went to see several ANC MPs at the time to say, listen, what's going on here? Surely you should be looking what's going on in the Reserve Bank. And they listened to me. They said, definitely, they agreed with me. They then came back and said, no, what I should do is speak to the Minister of Finance, Trevor Manuel. He's the minister involved, he should know. I assumed he wanted to know more about what I had to say, and in following up. And in fact, I found when I met him in his office at Parliament that the only thing he was interested in was, how did they do it? How do you redirect funds from state funds into party funds? That's all he was interested in. He wanted to know how they did it, and I gathered from his inquiry because he wanted to understand the techniques.
Could they not have taken maybe a philosophical stance or looked at the possibility of getting this money back? Because two judges, Heath and Davis, have looked at this and they haven't recommended that the banks pay the money back. In America, banks were basically bailed out. Could it not have been a decision, you know, just to not open this can of worms that we don't know how long it would take to close it, basically?
Those judges all come to something like that sort of evasive response. I think everybody was a bit nervous, made nervous of it, because the South African Reserve Bank itself was always defending itself on the basis that don't rock the boat because it's dangerous, it will destabilize the economy, the banking system, South Africa's relationships with the outside world. I don't actually believe that's actually true. If you think that the Bank Corp troubles came largely from many banks, the biggest one of them, Trust Bank, it had nothing to do with international dealings. It was all local wheeling, dealing and fraud that actually led those banks into their shaky position. As I've heard said before, if Trust Bank was to go down, and it should have gone down, the only reason it didn't was political implications here in South Africa for well-connected people politically here. But if Trust Bank had gone down, it would probably been a good thing all round. And the world would definitely not have noticed it. It was minuscule in the overall scheme, financial scheme of things. And as for the others, I mean, they were even smaller. So, I mean, Pretoria Bank and Alpha Bank, all those were curiosities. They were not serious banks. So, no, I think, I think the recovery prospects at ABSA, I can't comment on the legalities there because I don't think there was enough access to the documentation. But that the Reserve Bank's actions were illegal, and that for several years afterwards, while the CX thing was hovering, ABSA in fact made provision in its annual accounts for covering that claim over a 3-year period. So it would appear to be that the bank management said, well, if we are confronted with it, we'll pay, and we'll do it over a 3-year period. It's only when they realized that the government for some reason has lost interest that they removed that item from their annual reports. So I don't honestly think it had to do with keeping the banking system stable.
Martin, I have to ask you for a short answer, but I'd love to know what you think. As a country now, given where we are, ABSA pretty large, but a lot of resentment, a lot of talk of trillions having been siphoned off by the apartheid government. Do you believe that this should be pursued, that this should be recovered, if it can be legally? My own feeling is, as I say, I have doubts about recovery against ABSA and its shareholders. I think too much time has passed. I think we could learn from exactly how it happened in a closer analysis, although Davis did a pretty good job of that. I mean, he concluded that how the Reserve Bank had done these things were irregular, amounted to a fraud, in fact, were illegal. So I think we've understood that, and we have assurances that the Reserve Bank isn't doing it anymore, although my anxiety is that the current Reserve Bank management, and for the last 10 years, have been pretending that nothing ever happened. They consistently have denied any of this history. And I would have thought it would be healthy if they'd actually just come clean on the history and tell us. They now say they don't do those things anymore. They don't do it the way they did it then. Well, that's a great thing to know, but a little more frankness on what happened in the past would be helpful, I think. All right, thank you very much. Martin Welz, the publisher of Nose Week, live from our studio in Sea Point in Cape Town.